It's time for Market Explainer, your number one business news podcast. Hosted by Danny and the big man. And it starts right now.
Howdy, y'all. We're back. And right now we're going to talk about it. It's finally happening. I have pushed for the story, by the way. I had to convince the big man that we were going to talk about this.
That's true.
Fascinating, interesting thing is happening. Volkswagen. So Volkswagen, for those of you uninitiated, the United States, they're not a huge brand. They're a brand. They're a big brand. They sell cars. People buy them. At the
There's
height
probably
of the
a reason for that, Danny. 100 years ago. So,
well,
but anyway, go ahead. I digress.
Okay, well, I'm just saying. All right.
We all know who makes the Beetle, right? The Volkswagen Beetle.
Yes,
right.
okay. A guy who, Charlie Chaplin-esque looking fellow. Very interesting mustache, very eloquent speaker, apparently.
Yes.
Marched kind of funny. So there's a certain reputation. Hey, they're big in Mexico. Just our friends to the south here, our cousins to the south.
Yeah.
They built that original Beetle till 2003, by the way. Fascinating information.
Yeah, and they'll continue to bring it back because everybody and their dog look, great car. Anyway,
that's
got
not
off
the
track.
point, though.
That's not the point of the story. Go ahead.
Interesting little piece of tidbit. I'm a business nerd, so I love talking about this stuff. Volkswagen bought a part of a company called Navistar, which is a commercial engine manufacturer. They built the 7.3 diesel engine that was in Fords for the longest time, that everybody thought was the greatest V8 diesel engine. Yes. Our friend Danny, I'm not going to say his last name, the mortgage guy, Danny, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yep.
He has a 7.3 old body style Ford F-150. And I said, if you ever sell this thing and don't call me, he said, you're going to have to kill one of my sons first because they're in line for this. I was like, you got to call me when you get ready.
And Ford bought it from what was originally International Harvester.
Right. So all of this to say, Volkswagen ends up with this name, Scout. Mm-hmm. Now, if you pay attention to cars like I do, you saw that Ford brought the Bronco back, and they initially were going to bring back the Bronco Scout, which was going to be a smaller version, which they ended up calling Bronco Sport, which ended up coming out first. And every hairstylist I know traded in her Wrangler to get one. I know a lot of hairstylists. A lot of my exes are hairstylists. So
the Bronco Sport, garbage, complete garbage. It's basically a SUV.
It's a crossover.
It's a car that looks like a tiny SUV. That's all it is.
Yeah, which is, hey, it's marketing. That's what companies are for, right? So Volkswagen ends up with this historic American nameplate, Scout. International Harvester was this company that made tractors. Mm-hmm. Big Man just informed me before in the pre-show that they used to have an International Harvester truck on the farm where he grew up. And they stopped making vehicles for the public in the late 70s maybe?
Yeah, up until I think 76 was when International technically, stopped making anything but diesel engines, right at that point. But yeah, it was in the mid 70s, and previous to that, and you and I had talked about it, they originally were supposed to be a government contractor type of company, but Jeep won that bid. We all know and have seen movies and military Jeeps and this kind of stuff. The Scout was essentially named because it was originally supposed to be a scout vehicle in the military. It didn't make it that way, obviously. Didn't get the contract, so they continued. Well, hey, we've got this. We're making this, car. We're gonna sell them, and you and I were talking. It created the vehicle. Some vehicles, Chevelles, old Mustangs, even El Caminos back in the day. Some vehicles back in the day created a cult following. If you were an El Camino guy, you are still an El Camino guy in 2022. Right?
That's right.
And most listeners may not even know what an El Camino is. Look it up. You're going to see that it's a car and a truck combined in a very weird way. But if you were an El Camino guy, you are still an El Camino guy.
It's the automotive mullet, right? It's business in the front, party in the back. 100%. And if you're an El Camino guy,
to describe one, an automotive mullet.
Yeah. And if you're an El Camino guy in 2022, you have a mullet, right? You have a hockey mullet.
You might have, but in
Yeah.
this way, the Scout back then, the International Scout, still
Yeah.
to this day, people love these
Huge
old
following.
cars.
Yeah, they have a huge following. So Volkswagen ends up with a name, and they say in 2026 we're going to bring this brand back as an EV only brand. Now,
Mhm.
here's why I fought for the story, and I fought like it was Nam, baby. I mean, like that's how I was fighting for the story. Here's why it's fascinating. The board of Volkswagen has approved that this new brand will be sold direct to consumer. So the Volkswagen's existing dealer base is saying, "Hey, you're about to cut us out of this new piece of business, right?"
They're trying to go the Tesla model, which Tesla
Right,
has tried. Now, certain states, different laws, including Texas, that Tesla still cannot direct to consumer in the state of Texas.
right,
So Volkswagen, look, Volkswagen is banking on that Tesla is going to get this figured out in all these states by
right,
2026 when this is
right,
supposed to come out. They
right.
are also banking on, look, this isn't a new idea. We live in a copycat business world.
Yeah,
General
of
Motors
course.
did this a year ago with Hummer, right?
Right,
That they're revitalizing the Hummer, right?
right.
Which traditionally does. There's an old joke, and that I forget the comedian that said it back when Hummers, when they started selling them to regular people instead of being a military vehicle, and then they had the Hummer, the H2, the H3
Right,
that just became more and more regular SUVs instead of Hummers. And
right.
the comedian, it was famous. It was like, yeah, I own a Hummer because fuck the environment, right? So
Now, I agree with that sentiment. Now, the electric Hummer does a much better job of doing that to the environment than any of these eco fascists will ever admit to, right?
but turning around 10 years later and making the Hummer an EV, right, is
Yeah, it
like this
really.
big, right?
Well,
And
because so,
that's what Volkswagen is doing.
right. So if we remember, we did this story. I can't remember when a couple of weeks ago about Volkswagen was shipping some EVs from Germany,
Yep.
and oopsie daisy, $1 billion they lost on this thing catching on fire. So
Yeah.
Volkswagen goes, "Hey, guess what, guys? We're not going to keep shipping these EVs here. So they're going to build a factory for this new brand, Scout." And they said, "Hey, we're going to revive this." So they're doing a couple things, which I think is interesting. Here's a major established automaker bringing back a old brand that has a bunch of heritage in the United States. Now, Volkswagen, again, like I was saying in the beginning, doesn't have the strongest foothold, but is always competing with Toyota to be number one. Toyota
In the
competes
world,
in this
in the
in the
entire world.
world,
Yeah.
and Toyota competes. This is how they compete. We're Toyota everywhere. Everywhere we go, we're Toyota.
I actually
Volkswagen's
learned this week that Toyota, their headquarters, is
yeah,
literally in Toyota, Japan. Like the city,
yes,
there's a
is named
city named
Toyota
Toyota.
with a D, right? Because the
Well,
original, the
but I
family's name
didn't
is a
know
D.
that, you know,
Yeah,
like that's the craziest thing that Toyota
yeah. So the
headquarters is in
CEO,
Toyota, Japan.
so the CEO of Toyota is the grandson of, I think it's Ichiro Toyota, with a D,
Right,
right?
something like that. I knew he ran
Yeah.
it, but again,
So
having
the
the city,
right. Well,
anyway.
I mean, hey, so but Volkswagen has done this thing where they acquired companies. They acquired Audi. They acquired Porsche.
Mm-hmm.
They acquired um uh oh shoot Lamborghini. They own all this all these Bentley. They became big through acquisitions. They became big through attrition. They and now they acquire a lot of stuff, but they have a procedure where they Volkswagenify a brand where they buy it.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, it's worked for them. So if you look at the Seat Cupra, which is a vehicle we don't get here, they get it in Spain. I mean, like it's just it's a GTI. Like we get it here as something else, but nonetheless, this is an established brand bringing back an old name. So if you look at Rivian, Lucid, all these other companies, they have these names that no one really like where they come from, right?
Well, no,
And
because they're a new
actually,
car company.
yeah,
There is no loyalty.
right.
There's no foundation of loyalty already there.
So Volkswagen was very successful in bringing back the Beetle, right? The new
Mm-hmm.
Beetle. And all they did was copy the old shape and took a bunch of crap that they already had at the factory from a Volkswagen Golf or a Polo, and they
Mm-hmm.
just threw it all there and said, "We made it round on the top." And they just sold a bajillion of them, right?
Well, this is always befuddled me when it comes to automakers, because foreign automakers, Volkswagen, right, back in the day, even all of your like you said, Ferrari and all these different kinds of things, they 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 would do what, when you say Volkswagenification, essentially what they're saying is, well, I bought this brand, I'm going to put a very similar engine that I use already in Volkswagen engine, and I'm going to put that engine in that car. When
Right.
Chrysler originally, or Mercedes bought Chrysler, or Chrysler bought Mercedes, I don't remember which. Essentially, they took all of the Chrysler engines out of all cars and replaced them with the much better, much more stable Mercedes engine. And you were driving around in a Chrysler that had a Mercedes engine in it, because that's what they do. They use their best technology, and that way they
Right.
can make much more for much less expensive. And that's the way Volkswagen goes about their business.
Well, technically, what they did was Mercedes said, "Hey, here's all this crap we don't use anymore," and gave it to Chrysler. It wasn't as direct as because they kept calling it a merger of equals, but it wasn't because it was like, no, no, no,
No,
you're
no, no,
beneath
no, it
us. So you get
wasn't.
our old crap. Yeah.
Yeah,
So if you see some guy in a Hellcat, like a Challenger, a Charger Hellcat, that's literally a E-Class Mercedes from the 90s.
absolutely.
They've retooled it a bunch, but nonetheless, they're going to they're cherry picking of a bunch of different stuff from other manufacturers. They're using Tesla's direct to consumer model. They're using an American brand that used to exist. They're reviving, so they're reviving an American brand. And here's why: in a sea of electric SUV competitors, this plan works because it's an established automaker like Volkswagen who knows how to build cars. Volkswagen knows what it means to build a car.
Versus
Rivian doesn't
Tesla.
have a clue.
Versus
Versus
Rivian.
Tesla, Rivian, Lucid, all these new electric car companies don't know what they're doing. I just saw a Rivian yesterday at the Infinity dealer. It looks stupid.
Well,
Okay.
it's a tiny truck. It reminds me of the old S10 Chevrolets. But look,
Yeah.
you're Danny's making a prediction. Again, we're talking
Yes.
2025, 2026, maybe even 2027 if it's an Elon Musk kind of thing where they push it
Right.
back a year or whatever. So we're talking about in the future. Now, and you make a valid point on that it is an American brand they're trying to bring
Right.
back by name. Now,
Right.
Volkswagen is obviously a German company. They are
Right.
trying to. Toyota did this with the Tundra back in 2007 when they went to the full size. When Toyota became
Truck.
a full size pickup truck, right?
Right.
Where it wasn't. It was a 3/4 truck. Then they went to a full size. But
Right.
what they did when they did that is they go, hey, we're going to make an American truck and we're going to make it in America. San
In
Antonio,
Texas.
Texas,
Well,
right?
that's right.
So we're going to make an American truck and we're going to make it in America, even though it's still a Toyota, right?
Right.
And Volkswagen doing the same thing. They want to bring
Correct.
back an American name. They want to build it, at least initially, in America, right, as an
Right.
EV vehicle, to try and, now in their estimations, they're trying to double their American market share, which currently is anywhere from 3 to 5% depending on the year. So
Right.
when you're talking about in America, it's a small percentage of the overall
Right.
market.
But I think it's easier to capture the EV buyer with a heritage nameplate that it feels cool that you have. I drive a Scout. Now, if you tell someone you drive a Rivian, they're like, "What's that?" And in the future, they're going to say, "How do you get that repaired?" Because didn't they go bankrupt after Ford sold off all their shares? Amazon took it in the pants because of Rivian. The last guy holding the bag is George Soros. I'm even afraid to say his name. I believe it conjures a demon. I don't know if that's true or not. Hail Mary, full of grace. Like,
That is great. Anyway,
okay.
you have a point. I just don't know that it's going to work. This is actually my
So,
issue with most EV manufacturers. Why would you go
right,
out and buy a Lucid EV or a
right.
Stellantis if Ford's going to make EVs? If
Well, no,
General Motors are going to make
Stellantis is
EVs?
Chrysler, but no, I
But
know
you
what you're
see what I'm
saying.
saying. I'm sorry,
Yeah, why would
Not
you?
Stellantis. What's the one that sounds like that? That's also another EV that doesn't
There's
make
a
cars
bunch.
right now.
Yeah, there's a bunch of them. But the point is, why would you buy a Rivian? Why would you buy a Lucid? Why would you buy any of these? Tesla has proven that it can sell vehicles. But let me tell you something. I don't know about where you live, but if you drive around to the higher end used car dealers in your town or your big metropolitan area, you know what you're going to see a bunch of sitting in the lot? Teslas, right? So I know people who bought the Tesla, tried to live with it for a couple of months. I know somebody who tried to live with it for a year. can't, it just, for them, it doesn't work. I know people who own it as a third vehicle, right? They have two or three vehicles, and this is like, okay, we're adding a, for them, it works.
Right.
So,
And I'm not bashing Tesla. I love the company,
no,
love Elon Musk. I'm
yeah,
just saying they have to go through. There's a reason that these car manufacturers, a lot of them, Volkswagen, General Motors, Stellantis being what was Chrysler, right? Ford,
right,
that have been around for 100 plus years. They figured out
right,
how to make cars 100 years ago and have
right,
continued to make that. Tesla hasn't been through that,
right.
right?
So what Volkswagen has is they have manufacturing prowess. They already manufacture cars in North America, down in Mexico right now. I think they have a plant in the U.S. in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Their U.S. headquarters is Chattanooga, Tennessee. I tried to go work for Gary Vee in Chattanooga when he got that deal with them. It didn't work, obviously. They didn't even call me back, and they told me never to call them again and asked me to leave their headquarters, which was offensive, but okay.
That's all.
Um, they have a heritage American brand that has a
Mm-hmm.
reputation when it comes to off roading and stuff like that. You have a swell of interest in, this is something that Big Man and I didn't discuss, but overlanding, right? People going out into nature. The Panini accelerated what was already happening, where people are like, why do I want to go on a vacation to Mazatlan or Tulum, right? When I can go drive in nature in America and live in a van like a weirdo.
And put a satellite on top where I can still have internet, right? And still
Right.
have TV and whatever.
And you start combining this, there's 15 different markets at play here, where Ford's Bronco
Mm-hmm.
is a commercial success, but a mechanical failure.
Right.
Okay. So they're going to end up beating Ford to the punch. Chevy, who even knows? GM brought the Hummer back, but I think they delivered 15 of them this year and then recalled all 15 of them for
Right.
fire hazard or
Well,
something.
but where it's gonna where again, this is I think Volkswagen has a better shot than say Rivian or Lucid
Yes.
because they know how to
Yes.
make a car, right? They're
That's what
gonna
I'm saying.
figure it out. General Motors and Ford are going to pierce the EV market when
Right.
Ford starts delivering the F-150 Lightning. Because
Correct.
if you own a Ford F-150, if you're a Ford guy, they already have brand loyalty, right? Ford.
Right.
And if you're an F-150 guy, that's how you penetrate the US market. You come out with
Right.
the truck, right? General Motors Hummer, forget General Motors Hummer EV. What they need to make, and they are, right, is the Sierra Electric, I forget what it's called, the Bolt,
Yeah.
right? The Bolt. So,
No. They're coming out with a Silverado EV. It looks
right,
like
but
an old
isn't it
Avalanche, but
called the
yeah.
Bolt?
No,
Isn't
the
it this?
Bolt is their the Bolt is the EUV, which is like it looks like a tall wagon. It looks like a Subaru kind of.
Oh, okay.
The Bolt
Okay.
is yeah, that's what you're thinking of.
So,
But
but I know they're making a Silverado EV,
yes,
right?
yeah,
And Ford's is called Lightning, the F-150 Lightning, right? So that's
yeah,
when you penetrate the American market, is when you
right,
start making what looks like a truck, which is what Americans want to drive, right?
right,
And it's an electronic vehicle. And then you can push into the SUV market, which
right,
Volkswagen has done one thing I think very intelligent in this, and this is what I call copycat business model, is they say, hey, we're not going to try and compete while all y'all are trying to figure this out. We're going to
right,
compete 3 or 4 years from now. We're going to set the infrastructure. And then when
right,
everybody's figured everything out, we're going to
right,
just copy that
right,
because there's
and
no such thing as a secret anymore. Right?
right, and so. Maybe were you thinking of Fisker when you were saying Stellantis? I mean, there's
Yes.
Fisker, Lordstown. There's so many of these EV popped up.
And those are
Hold
just the
on.
ones in America. When you talk about the
Right.
ones that are over in Asia, there's another
Correct.
half a dozen EV
That we,
companies over in Asia that I
right.
think there's only one of them that actually makes cars yet, right?
Right.
And the rest of them are in that we're
Yeah.
gonna
Yeah.
make
Yeah.
cars stage. But
Right.
I think it's got a chance. I think it's got a better chance than the other ones you just listed off.
100%.
Um, Never been a Volkswagen guy. Never been. I love the original Volkswagen Beetle. It will.
Right.
I mean, they were go kart engines. You could fix
Yeah.
them constantly,
Easy.
easily. I've taught people how to work on engines using Volkswagen engines because they are
Right.
so simple.
So simple. Yeah.
But I'm obviously a German company, just never been a big fan of their cars, their luxury vehicles, any of it.
None of them,
But
yeah.
if they come out and they do the marketing right and they go, hey, we're like Toyota did, again, follow their game plan. We're going to build it in America for Americans,
Right.
right? And it's EVs, so it's the new hottest topic. And they do it right, meaning they do learn from Ford and Chevrolet, whatever mistakes that Ford and Chevrolet make over the next couple of years. And they go,
Right.
hey, we need to not do X, we need to not do Y. And
Right.
if there just so happens to be a battery breakthrough between now and then, they could be poised right in the middle to just
Right.
start. We don't have any legacy batteries. We're starting
Right.
with the newest technology.
Correct. Just a little tidbit, for those, if you actually, want to buy a classic Beetle, don't go searching to the United States to get one. Hop down to good old Mexico because you can import one that's 25 years old. They made them till 2003, and I think in 93 is where they switched the manufacturing process. So they kind of went, doo, 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 doo. But before that, you can just start importing like an 80s, like, a 40-year-old design from the 80s that they kept making.
And
So
even on top of that, and I know this because I was looking into it for my children at one point, is you can buy one of those old school manual
Beatles,
Beetles,
yeah,
and for about $3,000, buy an EV kit
kit,
that
yep,
specifically fits with that transmission. So you pull
everything, yep,
that, you put it's all laid out specifically
yep.
for Volkswagen Beetle. It
It's plug
slides
and
right
play,
in. It's
yep,
plug and play, and you now have an EV 1960s 70s Beetle,
right.
right?
How many miles do those get? Like you probably get like what 100 miles on a charge with one of those things.
It's like 150 depending because it depends on how many
Hey,
batteries you put in.
where's your kid going that it needs over 150 miles, right?
Oh, but that was why I was looking into them is because
Right,
hey, I could teach them and I have engines by
right,
pulling apart a Volkswagen
yeah,
engine, putting it back together, right, or
right,
whatever, and then make them help me convert it to an electric, and then they
right,
have a school car that they're driving up and down the street to go to school, right, or
yeah,
whatever, because they're getting close to that age. So if you can get a good deal on an old Volkswagen from Mexico, or you can
yeah.
find them around town, or you can find
You
them around
can, but
Texas, right?
you're gonna get a cleaner one down in Mexico. Is all I'm saying.
And then you spend $2,000 or $3,000 on converting it to an EV, it's
Right,
not $60,000 for a new Ford Lightning, right?
right.
So
So the only problem is your football player-sized sons aren't going to fit in there. Not all three of them. They need three. They need one
they
each.
need three, but then they
Yeah.
would treat them as crash carts
Okay.
or whatever.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. Fair enough.
yeah,
Well, this is a story here on Market Explainer. We're going to continue to follow. We're
yeah,
going to follow up on. One of the reasons I pitched the story was able to sell it to the big man was, hey, we're going to track this thing till the plant opens. We're going to the opening of the plant as Market Explainer. We're going to be there. They're like, who are these two weirdos?
we've invited ourselves, and when Danny
Correct.
shimmies into the middle to grab
Yep.
the scissors,
Yeah.
we'll
Yeah.
record
Yeah.
that.
Yes. And then, of course, the trial will be public, so that will come out. And then, yeah.
We'll
So
televise it like the Depp Heard trial. There you go.
there you go. All right.
All right. Well, who's our
Well,
sponsor, Danny?
I want to tell you about Big Man Gear. You can go to bigmangear.com. You can learn all about the Big Man's brand. That's this guy. He has a t-shirt brand. He sells graphic t-shirts. They're fun shirts. They're printed and delivered by Amazon, making everybody's life easier. Go to bigmangear.com. They'll take you to the Amazon store and check it out.
That's right. All right, folks. We'll see you next time around.